to Scott Bryson Beyond the Service. This is episode 001 with my good friend Al Story. Al joins us tonight. Al, thanks for being here, buddy.
No, Scott, thank you, brother. It's a pleasure. It's an honor. You and I talk just about, if not every day, 2 or 3 times a week, but I get to see your smiling face for a change. It's good to see you.
Well, I appreciate that. So what we're going to do tonight, Al, is this is our test run. This is our pilot. We'll see how it goes. So I've been doing some shorts, as you know. You've been seeing them on the internet, but this is
Sure.
our first full-blown interview. I wish it was in person, but I'm not quite up to Sean Ryan's ballpark yet, so I can't afford to fly people in, but we're going to do this thing virtual. So I just wanted to kind of get right into it. This is going to be about an hour. This interview might be a little unusual because we have a lot to cover, so this might be part one, and then we may have to do a part two. Hope that's okay with you, because I really want to spend a lot of
Absolutely.
time talking about New York and our time together there. So we'll just have to see how it goes tonight. But I just want you to kind of give an overview. I know you're from Georgia, good Georgia boy. Go Dogs, right? And
That's right. Go
and you're
dog.
living in Alabama now. But just give the crew a little history on, like, you grew up and you played football at Alabama, and then you were sheriff's deputy and GBI and Secret Service, and just a quick overview of that type part of your life with your family and everything.
Sure. Great. Yeah, I grew up in the very northeast corner of Georgia. You might as well call it the foothills of the Appalachians, which I know you're very familiar with because you're a North Carolina guy, and I know you went to Appalachian State. So just right there on the line. So from mom and dad's house, gosh, it was about 15, 20 minutes, and you'd be in North Carolina. So we'd get 4 seasons. The leaves would change. We'd get sleet. We'd get snow. It was great. And I grew up there. My parents grew up there. My grandparents, and I think that area. I think my family on my mother's side settled there right after the Civil War. Believe it or not, so they've been there forever. And so I went to Rabun County High School. The Fighting Wildcats, and then after that, still wanted to play some ball. I got lightly recruited, just very very small schools. So I figured out my best option at the time. I walked on at West Georgia College, which was in Carrollton. I played there for a couple years, and I was actually fortunate. I actually got to play some leading into, especially during spring, leading into the fall. But then I came into the fall, and I found myself way back on the depth chart again. My second fall there, and I thought to myself, if I'm going to do this, I kind of always wanted to be a Bulldog. So I transferred to the University of Georgia. I walked on there, and pretty much was relegated to running the scout team. So I got beat up pretty good and pretty consistently. But back then, this would have been the early '90s. Division I schools were still playing junior varsity ball, believe it or not. So I ran the scout team against the first string defense during the week, and then I started both ways on the junior varsity, playing quarterback and playing free safety. And then I did get to dress out for some games at Georgia, and then I was very honored and blessed that I did earn a varsity letter my senior year, which was '91, and I used that. That certainly helped prepare me for the rest of my life. As you well know, you played high school, you played college ball. I mean, the things that you learn, out there on the football field, and the good Lord didn't never create a better team sport than football, and that's what it taught me so many life lessons that quite honestly helped me, in local, state, and federal law enforcement, as well as just being a better, in my opinion, just a better father and husband and human being. That I learned the qualities on the football field. So my original plan was to join the military, and that was kind of what I was thinking until we had a coach, Coach Hornsby Howell, God rest his soul, just a fantastic human being, and he came to me and he said, "Hey, I've got a couple Secret Service agents that are coming to talk to some of you guys that are getting ready to graduate, that have played football, and sit down, have dinner with them." and just listen, hear them out. And he said, I think that you might be interested. And you might be a good fit for that organization. And again, at the time, I was thinking I was just going to join the military. And but I met two of these gentlemen, and I ended up uh, it was um, it was Rick Kerr and Jimmy Rogers. I don't know if you remember them, but I ended up working with them and for them once I got hired. But they came to Athens, and I sat down. I heard their spiel, and I'm sure much like you, I was just like turned on to it. I was like, man, that's what not that that's not what I want to do. That's what I have to do because it just really resonated with me, and I was just fell in love with it, with the way they delivered the sales pitch about what the career is, and the things they had gotten to do in their lives and their careers. And as you well know, back in those days, because I mean, I think you came on maybe 6 months after I did. So, back then they were only running, two, three, four, maybe four classes a year through the Secret Service. So, I went through the entire process, and then they basically told me, they said, "Hey man, you don't have any experience. You're going to get there, but you're not there." And I said, well, "What do I have to do?" And they said, "Well, we're looking for prior law enforcement, prior military, and that's what it's going to take." So I kind of backed up and, to use a football analogy, I punted, and I ended up working for my cousin, he was the sheriff back in Rabun County where I grew up, and he put me to work. So I started off, I'm talking grassroots, just like, as you well know. I mean, I started off working in the jail, and I was, radio operator, and then I would get a little bit of time, just kind of helping out on the road every now and then. So I did that for about a little over a year, and then I got hired by the GBI, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, as a special agent. And so my first duty assignment was Middle Georgia, so I worked pretty much from Macon, Georgia, all the way down to Savannah. And it was a great opportunity. Primarily, I was working undercover narcotics cases, but got to work the '96 Olympics, and from there, Eric Robert Rudolph, of course, set off the bomb in Centennial Park. So I went from there. I was assigned to the Centennial Park Bomb Task Force, and working alongside the FBI and the JTTF, and I did that. Well, in the meantime, while all that was going on, I kept on. I guess you could say I re-energized my application packet with the Secret Service to take another go at it. And and quite honestly, at that point, I had my time with the sheriff's department. I had some time, good experience with the GBI. So I got hired in March. It was St. Patrick's Day. It was March 17th in 1997. Is my first day on the job with Secret Service, to the Atlanta field office. And my first assignment, of course, and I'll talk. You and I'll talk about how the service has changed. But my first assignment back then was to the counterfeit money squad, as you well know, and I think the service still works some counterfeit cases, but not. It's just changed now. Now all the federal crimes have kind of switched to electronic and digital currency, digital fraud, all those type of things. But back then it was still counterfeit money, so I was on the counterfeit squad my first 2.5 years. And then, of course, as you well remember, I would do, temporary post-standing assignments with, to supplement the president's detail, the vice president's detail, and then we'd do foreign dignitaries where we could actually work the shift before they had dignitary protective division. And life was good, and my wife and I got married, and sometime around, I guess it was 1999, our son was born, and life changed a little bit, and you kind of have to make a decision. You're like, the way the service is, I mean, it demands so much of your life. I mean, it's just similar to a military assignment. You get the call and you go, and you know how it is. We missed a lot of Christmases and anniversaries and birthdays, but that's kind of what you do. And so for 2.5 years, I was working counterfeit money squad, and then they transferred me over to the protection squad in the Atlanta field office, and I was doing a lot. Of course, I was doing a lot with former President Carter and Ms. Carter, because they were based in Georgia, and they'd come up to Atlanta to the Carter Center, if not weekly, it was like at least once a month, if not every other week. And so I do, you know, pretty much all those lead advances, a lot of the sites, do a lot of their logistics. They're driving for them while they're in the city, and that kept me, quite busy. And then of course working protective intelligence cases of individuals that were making threats against our protectees. Well, so from 1997 to 2002, about 5.5 years in the Atlanta field office, and it came time, as you well know, you put down your preference list. Where do I want to go? Do I, presidential detail, vice presidential detail, and at that time it was it was easy. I guess you could say the easiest decision. Kind of thinking about the way to maximize the time. Not just with my wife and my newborn son, but also with the in-laws and my family. And we had a protectee in Georgia, so I went down to former President Carter's detail as my phase 2 assignment. And so I spent. We lived in Albany, Georgia, and of course, then, I think I got there. President Carter was 76 when I got there in 2002, and of course now, if he come October 1st, I think he'll be 100.
Mm-hmm.
So I was there from the time he was 19. He was 76 years old till he was 80, because that's about the time when I left when he turned 80. But a lot of traveling with him, as you're aware. I mean, he did a lot of things in Africa. Trying to eradicate river blindness, the guinea worm, these horrible diseases that were pretty much permeating all over the continent of Africa. So we spent a lot of time in Africa, the Middle East, Russia, and his detail, honestly, was not unlike Don Jr.'s detail in the parts of a lot of time outdoors, a lot of hunting, a lot of fishing, and that type of thing. So I truly enjoyed that. And then later on, it kind of transitioned deja vu with Don Jr. But as you well know, I did 4 years with former President Carter, and it's time to start looking at your phase 3, within the service. And the way the Secret Service does, as you're well aware, I could have landed in Birmingham, Alabama, I could have landed in New York, I could have landed in Los Angeles. It's the needs of the service. How many times have we heard that? So I wasn't exactly sure, where we were going to go, or from the Carter detail, but there was an opening in Birmingham, Alabama. And so back then in 2006, the special agent in charge in Birmingham was Chris Murphy. And Mr. Murphy, I had done a lead advance at the UN while I was in Atlanta, and he was the detail leader. We got to know each other. We hit it off, and he reached out to me and said, "Hey man, I've got an opening. You want to come work for me?" And I said, "Absolutely." So, I figured that way that again keep us in the southeast. We'd be able to stay close to family, and I and just thinking, a Birmingham field office. I knew it wasn't an SES, a senior executive service major city. It wasn't a Miami or a New York or a DC or even Atlanta or Dallas, but it was what the service would call a medium field office. So I thought, well, I've got an SES office under my belt, and then let's go try a medium office. And really didn't think. It's kind of funny. You know how it goes. I told my wife. I told Kim we were moving to Albany, Georgia, on the Carter detail, and she started crying because you know how that goes. It wasn't exactly her first choice to move down there, but it's kind of funny how the good Lord works and how life works. She was crying when we went down there, but then now she's crying when we're leaving because hey, guess what? We're going to Birmingham, Alabama. Well, that didn't exactly thrill her either. So our initial plan was, we'll go to Birmingham, we'll stay, 2 years, check the box, and we'll pick up and roll on to somewhere else. And lo and behold, again, good Lord knows best. We get to Birmingham, and we just kind of fall in love with the city. It's especially the suburbs. I mean, we love. We're still in the same house. We've been here for 20 years now, and we love the public school system was great for our kids, and of course they were so young when we got here. Excuse me. The field office was great. Uh, we found a wonderful church that we liked, and everything was just really working out very well, and all of our ducks were lining up in a row, and it just felt like it was the right place to be. And so, believe it or not, from 2000, gosh, from 2006 to 2016, that was a 10-year run for me in Birmingham. Well, now I'm getting to kind of toward the tail end of my career. I'm starting to think, well, maybe I want to retire and pull the plug, as soon as I can. I'm starting to think about retirement. And lo and behold, in 2016, Donald J. Trump raises his hand as he goes down that elevator in Trump Tower. He's going to run for president back then, and so our mutual friend Darren Barnes was on his detail, and they had one of their guys that was on Darren's shift that got promoted. So they had an opening, and Darren came back to Birmingham and he said, "Hey man, there's an opening on the shift. Are you interested? You want in?" And so I thought about it, and I thought, you know what? Nobody's giving this guy a chance. At that time, everybody just naturally assumed Hillary was going to be our next president. And I thought, you know what? I'll go out for a 21, 28-day rotation, and, check out Trump Tower, check out New York, ride on Trump Force One, do all that, and then it'll be over. Well, 10 months later, he becomes our 45th president, and so and that's where you kind of start to come into play, because I'd been on the shift for 10 months during the campaign, and once he gets elected, let's see, Scott Christensen and Mike D'Ambrosio, they were Scott was our detail leader, and Mike D was our assistant detail leader. Mike D came to me the day after the election. He said, "Hey man, here's the deal. You've been coming up here for a year, and you know the city. You've gotten to know the family, all the moving parts. They're looking for someone. They're looking for several people to, head up the children, the first families detail. We need, Ivanka, Don Jr., Eric, Tiffany, and Barron. So he said, "Are you interested?" And I said, "Well, let me talk to my, let me head back home to Birmingham. Let me talk it over with my family." So it worked out well. I flew home for a long weekend, and we sort of voted on it. And I would have never done it. You and I have had this conversation many, many times, but we thought about it, we prayed about it, and I would have never done it if the kids were young. But at that point in time, our oldest was a senior in high school, the youngest was a ninth grader, and they were very supportive about it, and they said, "Hey, it's just really too good of an opportunity to turn down. Go for it." So just like I threw my name in the hat, and I was very fortunate that at the time, you and I both worked for Neil Haggerty as our he was our boss, our assistant special agent in charge on the president's detail. So you and I both got promoted on the same day on the same list, and that's what I found out I was going to Don Jr. And of course, you went to Eric Trump's detail, and then of course Chris Emery, went over to Tiffany. So the three of us, sort of all showed up together to DC. Not really knowing what to expect, but we were all in knowing it was going to be a great experience and a heck of a ride ahead of us, and so. So then it was the case of I think you and matter of fact, I remember very just like it was yesterday, vividly going looking at apartments and trying to figure out where to live in New York City, and we both found some good spots to land, and just starting that detail, you starting your detail. I know you and I tried to compare notes because those two brothers, we found out really quickly, just like any brothers, any family, I know your kids are the same way, just like mine. If you do something for one, you better do it for the other. And you and I found out that quickly, where we'd compare notes and make sure that we were trying to mirror each other's detail. Getting those things started from scratch, which and you've heard me say it before. without a doubt, the most challenging, the most difficult thing that I've ever done in my professional life. But at the same time, it was the most fun and the most rewarding time that I ever had in my career. And again, starting those details from scratch in and not just anywhere but in New York City, in the the largest city in the United States, arguably one of the busiest cities in the world. I mean, it's the Big Apple. It's New York. It's it's by none you're in the spotlight now. It's the big time, baby. So that's where we started, and that's where we kicked those things off. And to say to say it was kind of a, and I know it was the same for you, but I know I had a really, I guess you could say, what I felt like it wasn't a smooth kickstart initiation of that detail at all. I felt like it was tough to get it off the ground, just because just so many moving parts. I mean, you're talking about at the time. For me, it was Don Jr., Vanessa, and D3, Donald J. Trump III, Kai, Tristan, Spencer, and Chloe. So, I was trying to juggle seven protectees, and I think I had three different schools, but it was just a lot of moving parts, and especially in the morning, outside their Manhattan apartment building, just getting everybody. Hey, you're in this van. You're in this van. Okay, do you got your book bag? You got your homework, and it was controlled chaos.
Well,
But
I remember all too well. I sort of have PTSD just thinking about it. And I want to
no,
be clear, and I know you do too. Like, it's got nothing to do with who the protectees were. They were amazing protectees. It's
oh,
just
absolutely,
a 14 on PPD, and I know I'm biased because we both did it. I think a GS 14 on PPD or any protection, PPD, VPD, it's got to be the hardest assignment on the job. Shift leader in DC, super hard, but I would argue that being a detail leader for a small detail, especially in New York City,
yeah,
is
yeah.
just as hard, if not harder. And I know
Oh
we're
no, 100.
biased, but no, unless you've lived it, you can't explain it. And we can get into the weeds on it in just a second, which I totally want to. But the things that we had to do with no admin help, we were the admin. We were
That's
responsible
right.
for the guns, the cars, the protectees. I can remember being freaked out. I had been on the job 19 years before I got promoted, and you were probably around the
Yeah,
20-year mark or so.
yeah,
I finally got. You should be careful what you wish for because you might get it. I finally got promoted, and they threw us from the frying pan into the fire, and they're like, "Go figure it out."
yeah,
And I want to talk in a minute about. We're going to get into some funny stories and stuff, but I want to talk about the administrative side of the house and just, I mean, your schedule and my schedule. I had one protectee at that time because Laura, uh, President Trump had not signed the executive order to protect the spouse yet. So I had Eric, and I was freaked out. Well, I don't know if you remember this, but we were on Air Force. Well, I guess it was Bright Star coming back from DC to, and I remember watching you put those car seats in those cars on the tarmac, and I was like, "What is happening right now?" But
well,
we were on the plane going back on that short flight from. It was. I wish that flight would have been 3 or 4 hours because I was trying to catch my breath, and we were flying from DC from the inauguration back to New York,
yeah,
and I got called to the back of the plane, and I was like, "What have I already screwed up? What did I do?" And Laura and Eric called me to the back of the plane with Neil, and they're like, "Hey, we're pregnant," and I was like, "Do what?" And that's when they told
now
me that they were pregnant, and then I was like, so I went from one protectee to three pretty quickly, and but
there
then
you
I
go.
but I still never had it as bad. And when I say as bad, like they're awesome, I love them so much, and I know you and Don have a great relationship too. But just the sheer magnitude of trying to—it's like herding cats. It's like I have
Yeah,
three children, you have two, they had five, and they're all going in five directions. You want to talk a little bit about just like, let's back up just a wee bit. Let's talk about the inauguration and
oh
that
yeah,
day and the airplane ride back and then the tar. The problem was we didn't have an opportunity. We didn't even have an opportunity to get to New York really and figure out where
yeah,
these properties were. Like I flew in at dark. We flew in at dark and we're riding
yeah,
in a motorcade to a house I'd never been. To me, it was a disaster. I just feel like we were set up for failure. But
Well, and again, it was just there were so many moving parts, and you hit the nail on the head. I mean, it didn't matter if it was going to be, at that time, if it was a Republican, a Democrat, an Independent, it didn't matter. You're still, if you break it down, forget about the party affiliation. It's just the human beings that you're taking care of, and just they're so active. And again, just like we said, it's in Manhattan, it's in New York, it's in world headquarters, and there's just a lot of moving parts. But the inauguration, you bring up a great point, because I still look back on that day, and it was, I've said this many times before to my friends, my family, and to other groups that I've had the honor of talking to. They asked me, they said, Al, if you had to pick one single moment in your 23-year career, just one moment, one assignment, what would it be? And clearly, bar none, hands down, it's getting to walk in that inaugural parade, and you were right there with me, and I still have all the video, the pictures, but I realize just what an honor that was, and there's not many. There's not too many agents that are afforded that honor, and it was surreal. I just remember, just being as focused as we've ever been, and I remember those cold days up at the training center. I remember going through all those scenarios, and you were right there with me. We were all there, but I just remember it being so cold, and I remember you and I going. We went to pick up our government vehicles, and then we drove them up to New York. I remember you and I following each other from DC up to New York. And like you say, I was just focusing on, one property, that I thought I had to secure right there in Manhattan. And then, it literally wasn't until like a week or two into the job that I think it was Vanessa, came to me and said, "Hey, we're going to, our house up in Bedford." And I'm kind of like, "Well, what house in Bedford?" It's news to me. And now I'm all of a sudden, thinking, "Oh my goodness, here's a whole nother advance, that we need to do a survey on, and we need to go look at." And then once I got those two properties down, then Junior comes to me and says, "Hey, I'm gonna go to my fishing place in the Catskills." Oh, okay, where's that? Let's go check that out. So now we got another one to deal with. But it was, the whole thing. Like, I guess you could say the whole first 90 days to me of 27, from January of 2017 to really March. I feel like I was just on a treadmill with it wide open, just on a sprint with my head still spinning, and just trying to catch my breath and trying to get a hold of all of it. But then, finally, once we kind of got into a rhythm and a routine, kind of learning, all the different properties, the routes, the different personalities, everything really started to fall in place, and we were able to kind of catch our breath, and we were able to have a little bit of fun and relax a little bit. But seriously, as much as we could relax. But those first 90 days for me, it was definitely like jumping into a washing machine.
well, let's talk for a minute about the op tempo, because I don't think people can really understand. And I actually did the math on my vouchers. And I think you were there. I only ended up doing 15 months, which is just a whole long story. And I don't want to start dropping. I don't mind dropping names when we're talking favorably about people, but there's a couple people that you and I commiserate about, and I don't really want to throw shade on
Sure.
them openly. You know who I'm talking about, like former
Yeah.
SACs and DSACs, but like the
Yeah.
nonsensical paper, like the Secret Service has standardized paperwork. This is what we do, and then they would add to it. I don't think people understand. Even the people on the job that were requiring some of this of us didn't understand. Like, I'm not what I used to be. I'm 52 years old, and I'm trying to lose a few pounds and stuff like that. But I've always tried to be healthy and work out. I was eating
Sure.
like one meal a day, maybe working out once or twice a week, getting no
Yeah.
sleep, stressed out. I know you were too. I just don't think people can really understand unless you've done it. Some of it was self-induced. The service is really good at self-inducing stress on its employees. It's like they expect us to be flexible, but they don't want to be. And you know all about that all too well. But I know for me, I did 134 trips in 15 months. Do you have any idea how many trips you took and if you don't have the number, just talk for a minute about the operational tempo and just the craziness that we live through.
Well, I would say, I think you and I figured it out once upon a time, and I've forgotten that. I could probably come up with it, but I think you and I figured out that I'd done, pretty much at least that number, if not a few more. And I think just because at the time, Big Brother, well, and because you actually took a trip or two for me to cover Mount Don Jr. just to kind of give me a break to catch my breath. But that operational tempo, yeah, it was really unbelievable. And there were many times that we'd come in, whether it be a domestic trip, within the United States or even overseas. I remember one time, we came in. Uh, I mean, it was like 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and I got him to his apartment and tucked him in. I was so tired. I walked across the street to my apartment, just took off my clothes and just crashed in bed. And then I realized the alarm went off, and it was time to repack and wash, rinse, repeat. It was time to do it again. But yeah, I think I was told, and you correct me if you didn't hear this because you and I talked about it. But I think I was told I can't remember if it was 2017 or 2018. I think I led the service in the amount of vouchers that were turned in and the amount of just hours worked and overtime and leap pay and all those things.
Yeah.
But
Oh, I'm sure you were.
it was definitely,
I think that the between me, you, Haggerty, uh,
yeah.
what's the guy's name?
Uh,
Ivanka's detail.
Chris Emery
Not Emery.
was it?
Not Hayden.
You talking about Jason Parsh?
Yeah, Pretty Boy Parsh.
Yeah, yeah.
I think and we can't forget our boy Brent. Remember Brent
Brent Sullivan, Sully, yeah, Brent Sullivan.
and Minnie Muse. Don't forget Minnie Muse. And of
Yeah, of
course,
course.
Bosco,
Yes,
love
yes.
those guys.
Yeah,
But I mean, I think out of the top 10 vouchers in the country, I think 6 of them belong to that detail, which I mean, it was insane.
yeah.
So if you want to, and I don't care if you get into the numbers or not, because I don't care, but talk to the people about how much money we lost, which is a complete sham.
Ooh. Well, and it's that's what a lot of folks don't understand, and I actually had to kind of explain it to Don Jr. himself, just the way that just the way the Secret Service is set up through the federal government itself, the way that they are able to pay. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much you work. Your overall amount of total compensation, total cash, if you will, income that you can make it's capped. Okay, so in other words, let's just use an easy number. Let's say it's at $150,000. Well, then that means once you hit $150,000, I mean every other hour that you worked above that you should be getting paid for. A lot of times, well, especially back then, you'd have to eat it. You just lose it. You would have done the work, but you're not going to necessarily get paid hour for hour, minute for minute. But I will say, and you probably know better than I do because I know I pulled the plug before you did. I think, and I don't know this for sure. I think they've tried to remedy that. I think they've tried to start, I guess, giving guys and gals what's a max out check. In other words, whatever money, here's the max, and if you've maxed out on what you're supposed to make, the check and the money's above that max out. They've tried to give them some back pay, but I do know. I mean, my goodness, I think I ate. Uh, well, it was a lot of money. It was close to. It was a lot of
I'll put
money.
it this
It was.
way: we don't have to get into specific numbers. I have a couple things rattle around in my head. Um, I'll put it this way: it was a person's. It was the average person's salary, right?
Yeah,
I think
it was.
the median income at that time was about 40,000. 40. I know I ate about 40. I think you and you and Neil were higher than me. Like I know Neil ate a lot too because he was the 15. But
Yeah.
you guys ate more than I did, and I was not happy about it because the problem is that puts you in another tax. And I don't want to get into nerd land here, but like you get into another tax bracket, so you reap all the benefits of paying taxes on something
Yeah.
that you don't get to see. You know, it's just the whole thing's a shame. I mean, we could go on and on about taxes, which I don't really care to do. It just made me think about that when we were talking about vouchers and the op tempo.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing too. Didn't I know I did. I think you did too. I took a loan out against my TSP just to survive.
Yeah, and that was another
And I was
problem
pissed
because
about that, if I'm being honest.
the way that it was kind of set up and you know here you know you think about it you know it's hard for a government employee, a federal government employee, to live in downtown, you know, Manhattan in New York City. And it's funny because there were times when I'd go downstairs and you know where I lived, you know, right there, you know, overlooking the East River, and I mean it was, you know, it was definitely a high rent district to say the least. And of course, we had communal washer and dryer. So a lot of times, you know, I'd go down there to the laundry room and you know throw in a load of laundry, and that would give me a chance to you know answer emails and you know make notes to myself. And but some of my neighbors right there at the East River, you know, they would. I had a couple of them after we got to kind of know each other a little bit. They said, "Well, how?" Not being nosy, but how in the world can you afford to live here? Because they knew what I did for a
Yeah.
living, and I just said, "Yeah, well, it's funny you mentioned that. You know, I'm having to kind of rob Peter to pay Paul. I mean, you know, and I realized, you know, can't feel too sorry for myself. I know you and I. Nobody forced us up there. We raised our hand. We did it. We volunteered for it, and it was a great honor. But with that being said, just the system that was in place at the time was definitely not very user friendly for the ones that were doing it, for you and I and Chris, you know, Chris and even Neil. I mean, goodness, all of us, you know, kind of had a different financial situation.
Well, yeah, and like you said, it's no one really feels too sorry for you when you're staying in Trump hotels around the world and flying on Trump Force One. But you know, I did feel a little sorry for myself when I was eating one meal a day and working out every other
Yeah.
day. Just stupid first world problems, but it's like
Well,
it just consumed your life, and you're away from your family, and no one in DC seemed to give a
yeah.
rip. You know, and I think that's probably
Yeah.
why they pulled me back early because I was making some noise. But I'm like, I like it here. I want to stay. It was an 18-month assignment.
Yeah.
They pulled me back at the 15-month mark, which I think was to spank me. You know, I think that was time out for me because I was only advocating for myself. I wasn't trying to cry wolf. I just need some help financially. Pay my
Yeah.
dang vouchers. You
Yeah.
know what I'm like? Pay my vouchers. At one
Sure.
point, I had $20,000 in outstanding vouchers that hadn't been paid.
No, I was the same way, and it's funny. I think I told you this, but gosh, some of my vouchers were still being processed after I retired.
You see,
I mean,
but
because I mean, there were just
we were the
because I
bad
mean,
guy.
I would be turning in, you know, I'd be turning in three, four, five, six vouchers at a time. You know, I mean, just because it was like you know trip after trip, you know, um, and it was just the way it was set up, and uh, it was definitely a travel tempo that we as an agency had really never kind of experienced that. I mean that family, just the amount that they traveled, and I've heard Don Jr. say it, you know, many many times even after I've retired. You know, I've gone and you know I've seen him at different you know rallies and whatnot, and he you know he brought it up. He said, you know, I know I travel more than and he said not just myself. He said my whole family more than anybody else on the planet, and that's definitely an understatement between you know between campaigning and you know the hunting trips, the camping trips, the whatever, and you know the times you know family his whole family would go. It was definitely a handful. There's
Oh
no
yeah.
doubt about that.
So before we get into some of the funny stories that I can't wait to talk about, so we got to go. I was always jealous because you guys were always going off on these cool exotic hunting trips, and I'm like, Eric, let's go somewhere cool,
Yeah,
man. Quit taking me to golf courses. I'm tired of staying in 5-star hotels. I want to go camping. But anyway, before we get it, talk to the people real quick about like your schedule. Try to explain the work schedule just so they can sort of maybe try to wrap their head around the magnitude of how many bodies. Because with having one protectee that became two, and eventually had Luke was born on my watch, and so I never had a full time detail. I got up to about maybe 50%, but I would carry about 26 people on my schedule on a weekly basis. Tell the people how many you had to carry.
Oh my goodness, yeah. It would be with seven protectees. I mean, you're talking. You got to factor in, as you well know. You got to factor in days off, and you have to factor in depending on the different travel locations. Because now you can't always assume that all seven of them, if they do get on an airplane, that they're going to the same places. So sometimes we'd have Vanessa would take two of the kids and go one spot. Don would take a kid or two and go over here. So now that even multiplies the amount of manpower even more, and it would tax the details. So yeah, we'd be upwards of, I don't know, 40 or more at times. Just to try to keep up with the pace. And as you well know, uh, it was just some of the folks that we had that would rotate in to supplement our details. I know you had the same situation as I did. Some would be, really excited and happy to be in New York City for an assignment, and quite frankly, some would not be digging it, and would just as soon not be in New York because let's face it, New York's I mean, it's tough. It's a tough city. It certainly earns its reputation for a reason. And a quick funny story on that. I'd been up there for, I don't know, 3 or 4 months, and I came back home to Alabama, and of course, our baby, she was probably a ninth grader then, but I'd been home maybe 2 or 3 hours, and she's just kind of staring at me at the dinner table. And I said, "Baby, what's wrong?" And she said, "Dad, you've changed." I said, "What do you mean I've changed?" She said, "I don't know, you're just mean. You're just meaner all of a sudden." I said, and I started laughing. I said, "Well, that's what happens when you spend time. You live in New York for a while. It just kind of
Well,
it's a dog eat dog. It's the
well,
pace of it, and you're just trying to fight through and survive."
well. Bless her little heart, but you're one of the nicest people that I know. And if that little child thought you were mean, I'm glad she never was around me because trust me, you're way
Well,
nicer than I am.
and probably, well, you're very kind and back at you, but probably her perception of her dad that she hadn't seen in 3 or 4 months is a lot of it. Honestly, was probably just the perceived stress that we were carrying at the time, and honestly, just being tired, as you well know, going back to the tempo and the daily schedule. It would be. Don Jr. was very busy, and depending on what he was doing, go to Trump Tower, start your day. I mean, he'd have meetings. A lot of times, you and I would go together to cover both those brothers,
Oh,
and
Al, I just thought of something. I'm so sorry to interrupt. We got to talk about taking them down to the FBI. I know I wanted to talk about that. Remember that fiasco? And I will say
I
this.
do.
I will say this. Hat tip to both of those boys because I was so naive at that point. Now, but this is 2017, so this is before the FBI kind of went off the rails publicly, right? They were so in tune to like something didn't feel right. Their spidey senses were going off, and I'm like, guys, are you kidding me? It's the FBI. Like it never dawned on me that the corruption that we've now kind of learned about, the way that certain administrations have weaponized the IRS and the FBI. Do you want to talk real quickly about that meeting that we went to at the FBI? That was wild. I've never been a part of anything like that.
Well, as I recall, and a lot of it. Of course, a lot of it, as you and I, as you know, is still probably a little bit on the high side, but it was there were some concerns for the I guess you could say to make sure that Trump Tower itself, the offices were secure and not susceptible to any type of espionage, listening devices, that type of thing. And I remember I remember going down to wasn't that at one PP? Didn't we
Yep.
go, or was it at the?
Well, I
Yeah, I
don't
think it
remember.
was.
It was either that or there. I don't remember, but I remember going upstairs in a room full of people, and I was like, "This didn't feel right."
Yeah, yeah, and then it was I remember it was an impromptu meeting. I remember me, you, and I think Neil might have. I think Neil might have been
I don't
there, and
remember if
of
he
course
he might have. I don't
Eric
remember.
and Eric and Don Jr. And
But
I, yeah, I just remember it was
I guess what I wanted to
very-
take, we don't have to get into the specifics, obviously. We're not going to mention countries and things like that. But like, I guess my point was that the bureau was saying, "Hey, we're worried about these things that you just mentioned, the espionage and the
yeah,
hacking."
yeah.
But it turns out, as we know now, they had FISA court warrant. They were the ones do it. They wanted to send an agent up to Trump Tower to plug into their computers, and thank God they didn't let them do that. Remember, I was like, "Oh, what's
Yeah,
the big deal? It's
I
the
do.
FBI. Let them come
I do.
up." And they're like, "Heck no!" It was wild.
Yeah, and just those days. I mean, it was it'd go from you just never knew when your day was really going to end. Sometimes, very rarely, as you well know, would you work a typical 8 hour day, but in the Secret Service, I guess, that's not to be expected anyway. But especially on that detail in that city, with that family, some very very long days. And I remember just trying to get some rest whenever I could, and trying to get laundry done. Trying to get some semblance of a decent balanced meal to keep yourself healthy. And that's another thing. I spent so much time with Don Jr., and he'd always uh, he'd like to fly commercial a lot, as you well know, because you and I sat together on a lot of those flights. And but many times I'd sit beside him and on a commercial flight, and I remember I was planning to come home to see my family, and he caught the flu because we were coming back from a hunting trip in Texas. He came down with the flu, and I got back to New York just long enough to catch a nap, because I had some annual leave and I was going to fly home the next day. Well, by the time I landed in Atlanta from LaGuardia, I could already feel it. So pretty much anytime he'd get sick, I'd come down with it, just because we were in such close proximity to each other all the time, and it was very predictable. And so yes, I got home to visit my family, but I brought the flu with me. So that usually went hand in hand. And just thinking about, gosh, all those trips, and I know the trips I took with you, when we did get to do some hunting trips together, when Don and Eric would go together. I think about that trip in Louisiana. I think about that trip in Montana, where there had to have been at least 14 inches of snow on that unbelievably nice ranch out there in Montana. And I remember those two stayed in one of the guest cabins, and then you and I stayed in that travel trailer. And I remember, of course, it's cold. It's I don't know what it was. It got down. Well, I do remember because I took a picture of it. It was below zero at night. And I remember you and I had a gas. We had a gas hookup providing the heat to our camper. And I remember those two goofballs were plotting to cut our gas off. And I think, and I'm gonna keep this either G rated or PG rated, but they were gonna. Once they cut the gas off, and they were going to try to freeze us out, then they were going to open the door and throw something that probably didn't smell very good into our camper while you and I were in there sleeping. But you
Yeah,
never knew.
yeah.
You never knew with those
Oh
those two
yeah.
jokers. It was you had to really be on your toes, because they were always looking to try to play a joke, or get the best of you, as you well
Oh yeah.
as you well know, as you're aware.
That might be my favorite
But
trip that we took together. We didn't get to do a whole lot of stuff like that together. We're just so busy doing different things. They were trying to run a company,
yeah,
and just to kind of touch on what you had mentioned earlier, you know, first of all, it was the first time that we had sitting presidents' children that were grown children living in a different state, which happened to be New York. I was there I was on PPD when Bush was in office with the Bush twins, and they were in high school then college. Okay, that was kind of challenging because they
sure.
went to two different colleges, but there was college girls. Then you had the Obama girls, and they were in grade school and high school, and then they, so. But now this is the first time we had a sitting president with grown children, like in their 30s, 40s, running a company worldwide. So what we were doing was completely in uncharted territory, and I think that was a whole nother element that put a twist on it that we didn't know what we didn't know. It was like baptism by fire.
Well, and if you'll remember this too, if you'll remember this part. Uh, and it's well publicized. It's not like I'm sharing something that's not out there already. It was public knowledge. But Don Jr. He signed off of his Secret Service detail. It was he found out that it was just too much. For his personality. At the time, and he wasn't a jerk about it at all. I just the way at the time I just said, "Hey man, it's kind of an all or nothing type of deal," and he said, "All right, I'll take nothing." And so he signed off, but then the week while he was gone, and luckily he was going to a place where. In Canada, where the only thing during that week that would really be concerned about was Mother Nature because he was so far out in the middle of nowhere. But while he was gone, the president got involved, and of course, the rest of his family and Vanessa got involved, and they basically said, "Listen, y'all are going to have to come up with something that's going to work for him because this is unacceptable." And so we did. We came up with I guess you could say, some type of a compromise that worked for the Secret Service, and it worked for him. And so he signed off for a week, but then he came back, and we picked him back up, and we made things work. But there was that was another crazy, hectic week for me because I really didn't know what my future was going to be. I think I even reached out to you because there was even talk that I might come over, to Eric's side to help you if they got rid of Don's detail, and but we were able to kind of salvage it and make it work. But I'm just thinking so many good times. I think of going back to funny stories. I think about I went with Don Jr. to Dallas, Texas, and he was a keynote speaker for the NRA conference at the time. And so, of course, everybody loves him. Obviously, he's very, very pro Second Amendment. I mean, the visit went great, but it was a long day. Long day. A lot of speeches, a lot of walking, and so he ends up the night he meets one of his good buddies. It was a couple of his good buddies. Goes with Gentry Beach. You remember Gentry, and then there was Oz, one of the heroes from Benghazi.
Oh yeah.
They all went out to a Mexican restaurant to get some Mexican food. Of course, I had my suit on, and it'd been a long day, and I'm standing right there beside them. They're sitting in a booth. And of course, this is one of these things in your career that you'll never forget. And they're standing there in a booth, and I'm just kind of leaning up against the booth, answering texts, answering emails, kind of checking on my wife and my family back home because I hadn't really communicated with them all day. And this is just another example of how you can never let your guard down, and you always have to be vigilant, and you always have to be on top of your game. And so, just out of nowhere, the band's playing. It's a restaurant, bar, Tex-Mex type of place. And just out of nowhere, from my 6 o'clock, a guy comes up behind me. I've told you this story, but he puts me in a headlock. Right? So my mind is immediately thinking, okay, now I'm getting tactical. What am I going to do? Are we under attack? What is this exactly? And so I'm thinking, do I draw my weapon? Well, no, because I can't see what's behind me, and that I can't justify that. So I just kind of reacted. It goes back to training, but I came up with my right elbow and I caught the guy underneath his chin, and then I reached back and I got his head and I just kind of pushed him forward. And the rest of the shift, I think it was Luke Devlin and Dan Lero, they jumped on top of him. And there was some Dallas guys jumped on top of him. So the band quits playing. You could have heard a pin drop, and then Don Jr.'s looking at me like, "What in the heck just happened?" And that kind of ended the evening. Just because it was sort of a major event, and I never will forget. I come up to the guy. They had him handcuffed, and I said, "What the heck are you doing?" And I never will forget. He looked at me right square in the eye. Of course, he had had a lot to drink, and he said, I just wanted to see how you'd react,
Mm.
and that's what he said, right? So we left the place. That kind of ended the evening. It was probably about a 15-minute drive back to the hotel, and it's pretty late at night. And I'm so worked up at this point. I'm like, okay, what just happened? The adrenaline's flowing. I mean, I'm still in that fight or flight mode, and for me it was more fight mode, right? And here's the point. Going back to Don Jr. being the clown that he was, he senses this, right, and that's he can't help himself. So he kicks the back of my chair. I'm in the right front seat where we used to ride. He kicks the back of my chair and he says, "Hey, Big Al, lighten up, cheer up." He said, "Everyone gets their ass kicked every now and then."
Oh,
So,
golly.
and of course, he just had to rub it in just a little bit more,
Yeah,
as
that's
if
what he does.
that wasn't about. I was already so worked up,
Uh,
and that took me. I had to really sleep that one off
oh
because I
yeah.
was even when I got to my hotel room, I was so fired up I couldn't go to sleep. But so many good times. I mean, taking even when I took. You might have taken Don Jr. for me on a trip. I took Vanessa and those 5 kids to Disney World. And we spent the day at Disney World, and then we spent half the day at Disney World and then half the day at Universal,
Hmm.
and riding all the rides. And of course, it was a heck of a day. But the funny part about it is we're driving back to Mar-a-Lago from Disney, and it's pretty late at night. We got Scott. We probably got no more than a mile from Disney. Had to pull the limo over, and just about everybody in there. I was like one of the only ones, myself and the driver, that weren't throwing up. Just puking their guts out on the side of the interstate,
What happened?
and just things. Well, just from all those rides, just all the cotton candy and the candy bars, the pizza, the pretzels, and just riding all those rides. Everybody was puking, and of course, it was all my protectees. That is,
That's
they were on the
great.
side of the road just heaving their guts, and I'm just
Uh,
sitting there shaking my head, just laughing. But those are times that again, once in a lifetime kind of things that
yeah.
you
Well,
never can.
I tell you, we're almost at our timeout, and we have so much. I would love to have you back on sometime. I mean, we're just kind of really getting into to the meat and potatoes. I know people are going to really enjoy. I mean, they've enjoyed your whole story, I'm sure, but really getting into our New York time has probably been the meat and potatoes of this thing. Would you be willing to come back sometime and talk a little
Of
bit,
course, I
maybe do
will.
30
Hey,
minutes or something?
absolutely.
And then I want to kind of get into like
Hit me.
our faith, right, and how that's played a
Yes.
part in keeping your marriage. How long have you guys been married?
26 years. So,
See,
and that's another thing, just like that if you don't have a solid partner and if you don't work at it and just, I praise God, I thank God, for every day for allowing me, not just for the breath that I have in my lungs and the heartbeat that I have every single day, but just for what the good Lord, saving my life, Jesus dying, for me, and just allowing me to do, what I've been able to do in my life, and not just, and I'm not just talking about being a Secret Service agent. It goes a lot deeper and a lot further than that. Just allowing me to be a Christian and saving my life and opening doors for me and just allowing me to do the things that I've been able to do.
well, I wanted to say one thing. I've said this to you before, and another good friend of ours, John Hamby, is going to be on here soon. And John,
Great man.
I've known John a little bit longer than I've known you, but I've known you a long time too. And of course, we got to be really tight in our time in New York together. But we've known each other almost our whole careers, I think. Our
Yeah. Oh
paths didn't
yeah.
cross a ton, but we knew each other from post editing and things. But I just wanted to publicly tell you this. And I know we've talked about it before, but you and John are some of my biggest role models. And like I used to tell people all the time, John Hamby's he's the guy you want your sister to marry. No one's good enough for your sister,
No doubt.
And but you're the same guy, Al, and I mean that. And I wanted to say that publicly because I love you like a brother. You're a good man. You set the bar really high, and to hear you tell a story about your little daughter, thinking you're mean, that little child has she has no idea how
Well,
good she has it because I'm a clown. Ask my family. I'm a freaking screwball. So I just really have always admired you. I look up to you. You set the bar really high, and I try to be like you, buddy. I really do.
Well, you're very kind. You're very kind, Scott, and back at you, my friend,
Mm.
because you're the one that sets the bar high,
Nah.
and you live your faith, and you and have talked about it many times, and I don't know how someone doesn't make it through life if they don't fall at the foot of the cross and just pray it out, because life is tough, and especially when you're just like we just talked about, when you're living by yourself in New York City, you better have a relationship with God, or I don't know, I couldn't have done it if I hadn't the good Lord was able to pull me through it and keep our marriage intact, because I left just like you did. I left my wife and my kids back in Alabama, and I moved to New York for over 2 years, and if not for the grace of God, we were able to make it work.
Yeah.
So,
Amen to
and
that,
I
brother.
love you
Listen, man.
like a brother as
Oh,
well, my
oh
friend.
yeah. I wish we could get Haggerty on here. He'd break the internet, man. We got to talk him
Well,
into it.
I'll keep working on it. You need to get, like I said, get Don Jr. on here and get me on here as well. But
Yeah,
there's no
Junior.
telling
He
where that would
actually
go.
said he would come on, and so we'll try. We'll do the trifecta one day, maybe.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, listen, we're
Well,
gonna
I
wrap it.
thoroughly enjoyed it.
We're
I
gonna
really have.
wrap
I
it up, and
appreciate.
I want to do it again really soon, buddy.
It's an honor, and truly is, just to be able to see your face and get to relive some old times, some
Yeah.
great times. I truly appreciate you having me on. I
Yeah.
really do, Scott, and I love you,
Oh,
brother.
hey, thanks. Real quick before we shut it down, give a shout out to the Bulldog Nation. Tell them about your cousin.
Oh yeah, so yeah, really excited. So number 14 for the University of Georgia. Just like I was talking about, he'll play a whole lot more than I did in Athens, Georgia. But his name's Gunnar Stockton. So Gunnar is my second cousin, and he's the current backup quarterback at Georgia, and he's getting to play a good bit behind Carson Beck. We have very high hopes for him. I mean, comes he's worked his tail off, and I'm hoping that number 14 will get his time full time behind center, hopefully next year and the next year.
That's good. I just want to give him a little shout out. Hey, Al, love you, brother.
Yeah, go
Thanks for coming
dogs.
on, buddy.
Yeah, love you too.
Okay.
Thank you for having me.
See ya.